How you doing, everyone? Welcome to Head of the Table. Boxing has always been a competitive sport, in the ring and on the promotional side. However, promoters always seem to get fights made. Until recently. In the UK, we've got a bit of a civil war with promoters. Across the water, there's a bit of a civil war with US promoters not liking a certain British promoter. It's hard to get a definitive answer why, but I'm here with the fellas to try and break down what is going on with this promoter war. I'm joined by Daniel, Hax, Charlie and Alan, and we're going to work out or discuss what the hell is going on. Fellas, before we open the table, I was going to give you guys a quick reminder. Back in the 80s, Don King and Bob Arum always hated each other, but always got fights made. In the 90s, it was considered the second best generation for heavyweights. With all the names and stars, we got all the fights made. What's going on now? Why can't we get nothing over the fence? Because I tell you one thing, I know the fighters want to fight. They want to get paid. Fellas, what do you think?
Well, for a start, the first thing that's probably changed over the years is the promoters are now aligned to TV stations or channels. In the past, you probably had fewer channels, fewer outlets. Today, I don't think you can count even on one hand the amount of outlets and channels you have, and all the promoters seem to be aligned to a channel. So that complicates things, because in terms of making a fight made, we hear terms like side of the street, etc., and that makes it hard. Because if you're on the wrong side, or you're on the wrong channel, or the wrong network,
or the wrong promoter,
or with the wrong promoter, you know, in terms of fights which generate large amounts of money, it's people always argue about where the larger piece of the pie should sit.
All right. I understand that, and I think as a business model that makes perfect sense. However, if you work out of your business model where you're doing a joint promotion, shouldn't that just be simply 50-50 and let the promoters deal with the purses for their individual fighters and say, right, then we've got a promotion, we're both joint promoting, we split the revenue down the line 50-50, I'll sort my fighter out, you sort your fighter out. Wouldn't that make more sense?
I mean, if you think about it from a point of view of two fighters, one's got a belt, one doesn't, you know, if the fighter loses and then, you know, that belt then goes to the other promoter now, you know, doesn't the previous promoter want some sort of guarantee that there's a rematch, or there's some sort of guarantee to have options on that fight, or something, isn't it? No one wants to just give up their trinkets just so easily as well. You know, we've seen that happen with particular promoters in the US, you know. But yeah, there's got to be some sort of guarantee, and egos as well.
Yeah,
100%.
That's what I was going to say.
Egos.
Yeah.
Just like the Fury Usyk. I know it's signed now, but before it wasn't signed because Fury wanted a bigger purse of it, even though he hasn't got the main belts. He's got the WBC belt, I think, but he hasn't got the main belt that Usyk got. So Usyk should be in theory, he got the most belts. He should be the bigger draw.
Yeah,
and that's why it's hard to get these fights made.
Right. So
ego.
And I think Daniel and Alan, your questions kind of working together. We're talking about having options on other fighters and ego. Ain't that part of ego saying, well, it's a competitive sport, someone has to win or someone has to lose. There's only two people there. So in case my guy loses, my ego says I must make sure I have options on you, or I have a reason on you, or whatever. A rematch, to me, is, especially, I always say I'm old school when it comes to boxing. A rematch is only valid when the fight warrants a rematch.
Okay.
So currently there's talk of Errol Spence versus Crawford in a rematch, where there is no absolute reason for a rematch. There was nothing in that fight to warrant a rematch.
it starts
that's my point.
before that point.
Yeah.
This is where Daniel's coming to. So where Daniel's point comes in, it starts before that point. That fight took too long to be made. It took long to be made. One, because initially Crawford was on the wrong side of the street. Then we talk about the split. And, you know, Errol Spence, like you talk about Usyk and Fury, Errol Spence had more belts and said, well, I should have 60, and Crawford saying, well, and he's proven it now, I'm the more skilled fighter and I'm undisputed at a lower weight class. It's his 50-50. Yeah, but like you said, the ego between the two men wouldn't allow that fight to be made. Now that fight had to be made, and the reason that fight was made was probably because it was there was a rematch clause, and we're all grateful that fight was made. And if a byproduct of that fight is we have an uncompetitive rematch, then that's what it is. But we're happy that the initial fight was made. So this goes back to Daniel's point that in order to get the fights made, people have to compromise, and what we seem to be observing is people struggle to compromise because of the ego. They struggle.
Yeah, let's sort it out. Let me just touch on a point. Let's look at the PBC for a second. What I've heard on this table right now is ego, options, and that's this side of the street.
And networks.
And networks.
And networks. Who's gonna show the fight?
Let's look at the PBC for a second. They do their rankings with only PBC fighters in it. They don't recognise other fighters within their rankings. Yeah? Again, you're looking at a sport which is a global sport, but they're treating it as its own entity, which in theory shuts out every other promotion.
And and maybe they're suffering for that now because we know what's happening with PBC. But if you have a stable of fighters and you can get away with that, you can't. From a business perspective, you can't blame them for trying to do that, because what they're trying to do is saying, well, if you don't come to me, you won't get a piece of the pie. So like you say, as boxing fans, we're having this discussion because there's a problem with boxing. There's a problem. We know there's a problem. But you've got these different business entities that are always going to protect their own interests.
Yeah. Can I say, just to jump in outside, I'm hearing everything I said and I agree to the most part, but I'm going to say I'm not seeing anything new that hasn't happened before. The promoters in the A's and I's, while the fights were made, they made sure they ate. They made sure that it was a business operation and they were looking after themselves. Don King is notorious for that. Yeah? Now, these boys are coming on the coattails of that, and they may be a little bit slicker, they may be a little bit more diversified, but the end point is still the same. I come in this business to make money off someone else's hard work and labour.
So, I agree to the extent, Hax, but by saying that it's nothing really different from before, have we as fans become accustomed to the shady play?
Unfortunately, I think as boxing, and I'm going to give you, as boxing experts, I think you come with an acceptance of this can happen. You come with an acceptance that a promoter will have his own motivations for creating a fight, and then for not only that, how that fight pans out and what the ramifications of that are afterwards, whether that's a rematch, whether that's whatever that may be. And I think as people who are well versed in boxing, it's not that you accept it, but you understand it, because it's unfortunately part of the boxing business.
Alright, I'm going to throw a name out there, and I want to give me your first opinions on this name I'm going to throw out. And the reason why I'm going to use this name in particular is because this week has been going back and forth with Ben Shalom. Last week it was Frank Warren. We got PBC keep going at him. Oscar De La Hoya keeps going at him. I'm talking about Eddie Hearn. Yeah? Some people may think he's the best promoter in the world. Yeah? Some people think he's the worst promoter. Such a wide swing on opinions on this personality. Is he the fault? Because normally I'm on the mindset of where if someone's always the catalyst or always mentioning that conversation of a problem, then that should be the problem. Or is it because he's so good at what he does, it makes him alienated? What do you think of Eddie Hearn, Daniel?
I think he is the number one global promoter because the Zone is a global platform. You know, I think he came into the game aggressively off the back of the Zone and probably rubbed everyone's back up the wrong way. You know, he was via the Zone, he was throwing money at fighters to get them to fight on the platform. That may have, you know, made other promoters wary or concerned about, this young upstart that's coming to the game and he's trying to teach us something, because you got promoters like Bob Arum, who's been in the game for decades and is still getting fights across, still getting fights done. You got people like Oscar De La Hoya, who is losing these stables but still get fight done. But it seems that they collude not to work with Eddie, despite the fact that the Zone and Golden Boy are actually under the Zone, which is Matchroom and the Zone and the Zone. But I don't know. I don't think Eddie's the problem. I just think that people need to sit down and see what's the best for boxing. What's the best interest for boxing, and that's what it is.
Hakeem.
I think that Eddie got a great opportunity off the back of his father. I think he ran with it as an entrepreneur and a businessman. And I think, from what I gather, and I don't know the man personally, he's pretty fair to his fighters. He pays them the money. Now,
and he tests them.
right. Now, is Eddie Hearn a paradigm of virtue? Of course he is. He's a boxing promoter. But I'm not going to call him the worst example of his profession. I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say that as a man who who makes his money off other people's blood, sweat, injury, tears, he's not the worst. But I'm not going to call him a good person. Could he do better? I'm sure he could. Could he? But I'm not going to blame him for, as you quite rightly said, other people's machinations or opinions against him for his success. I'm not going to blame him for that.
Okay. Charlie.
It's quite complex, I think, with Eddie Hearn. I think everyone said points I probably agree with. He's a good promoter. I don't think necessarily it's his promotion skills or that people question or people fall out with him for. I think it's more his comments, and I think it's more his character. And I don't want to say he's a bad person, but I just think he's quite intelligent and articulate with the way he uses his words, and I think he's one of the best spin doctors in boxing. Yeah, I really do. I think even this week, you cited this week and what he said about Aziz, and I clearly heard what he said, and I like to think I've got half a brain, but he almost managed to convince me afterwards he didn't say what he said. Yeah, and this is just him in a nutshell. And I think people who see through him, fall out of him, but he, as you say, he treats his fights fairly. His events, when we look at some of the farces that Boxer have put out recently, his events are on point, and he knows how to promote and set up a fight. And he knows how to strike a balance between. We've had discussions about some of this whole YouTuber boxing misfits, etc., and making money, and the money side of boxing as almost like a spin-off from the brand. He knows, he understands that aspect, the financial aspect, and how to maybe try and cross over some of that into boxing. You see a lot of people have, I would just say, probably ripped off some of the things he's done. So we've gone to boxing events and heard this whole Sweet Caroline, where it's now become like almost like a boxing anthem. And I know it's a very small thing, but there's little things you see that I think started off with his events that have span off. But having said all of that, I do think he rubs people up the wrong way with negotiations and some of the play on words and numbers and scenarios and timings. He's very good at timings, offering fights at the right time when he knows the opposition probably can't take it, but then he can say, well, I offered it. He's very cute. And I think people not as slick with the media as him fall out of him, because he wins or looks to be winning in the media, but he's basically not necessarily told the full truth.
Story.
Adam, I can't disagree with anyone on the table has said. The only thing I can say, I like Eddie, I must admit, but I think he could have handled the Conor Benn situation a bit better. And that's the only thing I said. it taints boxing a little bit. How he conducts himself. On the Conor Benn situation.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but think even about that situation. We take a step back. Which promoter could actually take that situation
And come out.
and come out and still put that guy back in a fight and make money? Who could do that?
Frank Warren. Yeah.
So, but you got to give credit to Frank as well.
Yeah.
Frank has been there from like forever, ever.
He's been for a long time.
Literally, and it's not even a joke. He survived it all.
Yeah.
He has.
He survived it all.
Literally, literally survived it all.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so-
like,
so
may she-
then
may-
if we're
may-
doing
may
that-
she rest in peace, but he's probably got the same doctor as the Queen.
But if we're
Let me tell you about Eddie Hearn quickly. And these are the things that I'm confused with the Eddie Hearn saga. Every promoter says, why did you put AJ in with Andy Ruiz? That was a terrible decision. Why did you put Canelo in with Big? It was a terrible decision. They criticise him for putting his fighters in
Making
competitive,
fights.
challenging fights, which says that the other promoters don't want to grow the sport. They're trying to keep everything in-house. On the flip side of that, I think Eddie does other things you could criticise him for, but they seem to criticise him more for his personality and his media presence. And I think that media presence is so strong, it overshadows not just the fighters, it overshadows the other promoters, which what makes him so hated.
Yeah, I don't know about overshadow. I don't know. I don't think it overshadows. I think he has a huge media presence, particularly through certain channels, and I think everyone has the same opportunity as him. It's just that, and I think, you know, in the past you said things that people wait until they speak, or a bit more selective in what they say. Yeah, and I think that part of that is down to, like I said, this guy somehow he can say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and somehow manage to talk his way out of it and smell like a bed of roses. Yeah,
Into the gap.
yeah. So I think because he's got that, he can go down avenues, get himself into trouble, and then walk his way back out.
Yeah.
And I think not other promoters. Their skills lie elsewhere, maybe with negotiation or
Contracts.
contract,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah. So, but what he's been gifted with, and I'm not saying he always uses it in the right way, is slickness of tongue, and we can't deny that. You can't. Yeah. And of
Sorry, just forget Eddie. He likes the limelight. He likes to be
yeah,
The set of attention.
Yeah, that's right. He likes to be. All the other promoters are not like that.
yeah.
So not like that. Yeah, he likes to sound his own voice, doesn't he?
Let me bring in Ben Shalom, who Eddie has been going at this week, and in my opinion, Eddie has outshone, outclassed, and made Ben look bad over the past few months over certain decisions that's been going on. Ben came to the sport with clean shoes. I think his shoes are very muddy now for actions he's
But
done.
I don't think just Eddie has, because Frank
Yeah.
has had his word
Yeah,
with him
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
And-
So I don't think just Eddie has,
Yeah.
but I think what you're saying, he came with clean shoes, but he had mud on them.
Yeah.
So I don't think, and again, I don't mean to interrupt you, Ryan, but I don't think that Ben Shalom or Eddie Hearn or Frank has done anything to Ben Shalom. I think Ben Shalom pretty much has gone and tripped up in a pigsty and got himself money. If I'm honest, yeah, I just think that he's done damage to
Yeah.
himself.
But what's happened is now is that relationship between Matchroom and Boxer is completely over. There is no middle ground to put anything together as a joint entity. Again, we could say the same thing with Frank and Eddie. Why is this promoter beef solely focused on that one particular name or brand?
I think if they're
I'm not a Eddie Hearn sympathist,
yeah.
but you know, if everyone says you're the bad guy, and puts you in a corner,
He's the common denominator.
he's the common denominator. But then it also, what's the word I'm looking for?
doesn't make him the bad guy. Though.
Doesn't make it a bad guy. It sells the stories that no one could work with you because of everything.
False narrative.
It's a force. That's what I'm looking at. It's a forced narrative. A forced narrative.
I think if you bring something to the table, they will work. So it'll be hard, but I think, for example, once the dust settles between this Usyk and Fury fight, and if I don't know who AJ is going to fight next, but that's a fight that the public,
Talk about Herbert, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's a fight. If they get through their various contests, it's a fight the public want to see. And I think with something like that, I do think, despite the differences, a Warren and a Hearn can work together. Ben Shalom, I'm not sure off the top of my head who he's got that could work with someone in Eddie's stable. But again, if the fighters called each other out, I think again it can happen. Yeah, it'll be the negotiations won't be easy.
Yeah.
But I think it can happen.
Like I say, Frank Warren had Eddie Hearn has a good relationship with Frank Warren's son.
Yeah, George.
I know that.
Yeah.
They have a good relationship. He doesn't have a good relationship with Frank.
Yeah.
But he has a good relationship with the son.
I mean, there's a news clipping everywhere where they disagreeing on something again. I'm in this situation whereas the Fury fight with AJ never happened. Yeah, and depending on who you listen to, they'll both say it's not my fault, it's their fault, and so on and so on. I mean, going back and forth, like I'm totally fed up with it now. I'm done with it.
Fact is the fact.
Don't need to discuss it no more. Yeah, and you can make a fair argument that that's at the highest level where you got sponsors and TV deals and so on and so on and so, which obviously can throw a spanner in the works.
Make it harder. Makes it.
But then when you go lower down from that, there's still problems in the mid-range cards and even the lower range cards. There's still consistent bantering back and forth. I think recently Eddie Hearn called Frank a small hall promoter. Yeah.
But how does that affect?
But this is what I'm trying. You get my point? I'm trying to say.
I understand, but how does that affect the fights? So, for example, what we seem to be seeing is like, for example, Chris Bill and Smith, if I'm right, was with Eddie initially, was he? Yeah. And then he's left now to his box because that's where his peers are in terms of his weight class. And I think that's what we're finding that happens. I think so. The fighters, I believe, are taking their careers into their own hands. So Buatsi, it hasn't worked out for him. Yeah, and Eddie's revelled in that this week. But the fighters have a say as well, I think, in this. So the promoters dislike each other. I think we all agree. Yeah, but I think the fighters are taking their careers into their own hands, and I think they're also, if they call people out, the promoters then have to do their job. That's what I think needs to happen.
I mean, you've got Fabio Wardley now, innit? He's having a fight with David Adeleye,
100%,
is how it should be pronounced. Adeleye, that's not his name. However, I know he was under Dillian White's promotional company, isn't it? Yeah. Which then was working with Matchroom.
Yes.
And now he's doing, is it a 1 or 2 fight deal with Queensbury? You know, and then perhaps I imagine this been the outcomes of that.
100%. And this is where,
and this is you know, and that's the thing. And now, same with Canelo, he had a couple fight deal with Matchroom, then he's got a couple fight deal with PBC and so on. And I guess that what you were saying is that it lies with the fighter, and I guess if fighters, have more sort of their own promotional power, I guess, then they're free to sort of negotiate their own 100%. Sort of deals and do the cross promotion.
Devin Haney, he left and came back, didn't he?
I'm just gonna throw again. I like to go off on a tangent, but I remember this story or this premise being explored in a comic in the 80s. I'm a big comic fan. I used to read Striker. And Striker, the premise was this guy only ever signed a 1-year contract with any team. Signed a 1-year contract, bang it out, win the league, and go to the next contract. And at the time, obviously, it's a comic, the premise, but this is this is where we're heading. We're into sports people saying, do you know what? I'm in a very limited time for me to make a success and to make a financial security for my family. What's the best way for me to do this? And I'm going to do what's best for me. I don't actually have a problem with that.
Yeah, you're right.
I really don't. No, the sport that they're in this case boxing, is very dangerous, very short-lived. The boxer should absolutely take control of what he's doing, when and how.
So,
but to be fair,
free agency.
Sorry, to be fair, I was going to say this is where you've got to give Eddie some credit because he's one of the promoters that's probably allowed people to do that.
I'll give that.
This is
AJ loved that with him. Yes, you're right.
We had a discussion off camera when we were watching the Chamberlain fight about the one fight deals Eddie was doing with the Zone, giving people like Mikey Garcia a lump sum of money for one single fight. So in theory, it sounds good to be free agent and, you know, 1 fight deal, 2 fight deal, so on and so. But what happens is you've invested, you put the big money down, and now your investment has run away somewhere else. That, it sounds good on paper, but that business mode can't be sustainable.
Unless you make the big fights. So when you've got that fighter, don't mess around with this. Oh, I'm gonna have a tune up and fight. You know, the road sweeper from Hull or whatever. Fight the big, make the big fights.
Yeah.
So when you've got, you know, this marquee fighter, make the most out of him, and maybe that will give us as fans what we want. I don't know, you know, but if we move that way, maybe that we'll get the fights we need to get.
Yeah, but as a fighter as well, if I get a 1 fight deal like that, I think, rah, if you give me 1 fight deal, maybe what happens if I give him a 3 fight deal? He can like triple one, yeah, so I think it's a good idea, bro.
So
It's a risk, but it's a good idea.
let me throw another element into it. We look at someone like Oscar De La Hoya, yeah, who's got a big promotional company, big name, big brand, everyone knows who he is and all the little bits and bobs. And he can't seem to keep fighters. A lot of the people,
Robbie Fowler.
he can't seem to keep fighters, and his cards have been getting progressively worse and worse and worse. The reason why he seems to can't keep fighters goes back to that element, whereas a lot of the PBC guys, a lot of the Eddie Hearn guys, his own guys are getting overpaid for their fights. Is there too much money at the top end being thrown around where it's actually alienating good promoters or promoters?
I can't. I know.
You get my point?
I get your point, and it's a very good point. But when you use Oscar De La Hoya, I mean, when you put your fighter in with Tank, and you leave him in his press conference on his own, and you throw him under the bus, and then you start wondering why I haven't got any fighters and why I can't. You know, listen, that guy to me is, when you put him against Eddie Hearn, for me, I'm on Eddie Hearn's back 110%. To me, he's a liability as a promoter. That's me, and I know as a fighter, he's a legend.
Different thing.
All that, but as a promoter, from what I observe, yeah, when you talk about looking after your fighter, no, God knows why Ryan Garcia is still with this bloke.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mexican heritage.
Yeah,
Latino
I don't know.
heritage. Latino heritage.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah, but what he showed me, and I'm not a fighter for him, so maybe there's a side I don't see. But what he shows to the public, that as an example, I think it's a bad example. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, I get. Okay, maybe it was a bad example, but the point I'm making is that there's so much money at the top end.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult for the promoters to get along, because it's a type of money that could sustain a career or sustain a business. So there's no interest in wanting to share that type of money with another guy 50-50 down the line. Yeah? So, we could have had, again, got Spence Crawford because it's pretty recent. We could have had Spence Crawford 2-3 years ago. But there was no interest in sharing that money.
No.
Once Crawford was out of contract and said, they tried to give him a dodgy deal first, and then they went to the real deal.
But the fighters.
But the point I'm making is that because the money's not being split, it was all under one banner, which means the money went
But
one
the fighters
place.
negotiated that deal.
Yeah.
So they took Heyman out. The fighters negotiated. So Errol Spence, to be fair, made concessions he's probably told not to make.
The only legitimate reason why I can see why the promoters argue, disagree, have this problem is the amount of zeros at the end of all of it.
100%.
And that's the reason why.
100%.
I think no one likes Eddie because he has that money from the Zone and because he's got the big personality. I think obviously people don't like the PBC because they can control their own narrative with their own rankings, and by doing that they control the money within that element. I think obviously Top Rank with their ESPN Plus deal is mostly the only major network deal Now that
That's
Showtime's
what I'm
out,
saying.
which is really ESPN, it might be a streaming side, but it's ESPN Plus, but it's still ESPN. That's a brand that is worldwide. So that brand generates its own stack of money. And I really seem to think that we're not getting these fights, we're not getting that cohesion between the promoters because it's literally about, I want to hold this bag of money for myself. Yeah.
I think Hack's made the point. I think that's gonna, when it comes to money, you know, I think we only ever, and we sit and we have debates like this, and it's you know, it's good fun and it's informative, and we all educate ourselves. But the bottom line is, we will only ever know half the story when it comes to money. You know, when the amount of money you're talking about, and this is, like you say, this has gone back in the days. Yeah, that's why prize fighters are called prize fighters, and we will only ever know half the story. And I think you're right, a lot of these decisions, and the majority of decisions, if not all of these decisions, are driven by money.
Yeah, but let's not forget, if you're gonna, for a cross promotion deal as well, if you know promoters are gonna work with each other, one of their fighters has the belt, one of the other. If the champion is gonna risk losing his belt, then it's got to be compensated highly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's what it is as well. It's right, you're going to take this trinket, you're paying for the trinket as well. Think about when, what do you call it, when Canelo fought Caleb Plant.
Yeah.
All right, they pretty much, PBC pretty much, I don't want to say sold the belt, but gave the highest payday so that he can become undisputed.
Yeah.
You understand? So there's going to be a cost to that as well. And at the time, was Canelo one match? Was Canelo being promoted my match at the time?
No, I think he came out
just
to
came out
fight,
to
yeah.
do that one fight. Yeah.
So they could make money off of Canelo's brand.
Canelo's brand, that's right. And I think how much they paid Canelo for that? 40 million, I heard. Something numbers.
But Canelo's is
But I mean, that's
smart.
That's different level.
Yeah, I mean, the likes of Canelo, and we talk about at lower level, likes of Devin Haney, these guys are moving on their own, really. And like you said, they're the ones that are always having this 1 fight, 2 fight deal. And
Can I just point something out to you? No, we all know how pay-per-view works. When you do a pay-per-view, the network take roughly 50% of the money. For you to pay Canelo 40 million, the network take 50% of the money.
Yeah.
And then the promoter gets obviously the rest.
Yeah.
How much money was on the table?
Yeah, but with...
And this is what I'm trying to say.
I think what they say is the pay-per-view, and again, I don't know the facts behind this, but what they say is the pay-per-view is really big if you get a huge Mexican following. So I guess with Canelo, I guess there's a like you say, those numbers, and I don't know the numbers, probably have
a guarantee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I'm saying is that with that type of money, there's no need to be greedy. If you have a fight which only has £50,000 on the table, which means you're going to split 25 grand each.
Okay, so
I can understand you being a bit tight. I can't split that. I need that money.
But that's been played out. What you're saying,
when you're splitting multi-millions,
but it's been played out. Like, you're right, because we go back to our mate Oscar De La Hoya. Canelo was there. Canelo said, "You're taking too much," and then he went with Eddie. And then he said, "I like this guy. Yeah, I'm gonna put you in Dolce and Gabbana because I like you. Because you're giving me a bigger
More
piece
money.
of the pie." Absolutely. So Canelo's now probably earning more than he earned early on in his career because he had our friend probably skimming a lot more, and it's probably. And that's in my mind, and I don't know the DL. But it's playing out exactly what you said. You know, it's somebody was greedy. He's gone and said, "I'm going to move with someone who's less greedy," because Eddie is probably thinking more like you. Why do I need to be so greedy with this guy?
I'm going to eat.
I'm going to eat. Absolutely.
That's pretty what other promoters don't like Eddie.
That's
That's exactly right.
It's smart.
100%.
You care about the fighter more than the.
But it makes fighting more than other promoters.
Eddie just understands it makes more sense to make 20% of something than make nothing of nothing.
Yeah.
It makes more sense. Why ask for 40% and the guy says no when you can ask for 20% and get your food? Eddie knows that.
Yeah.
He's already, if he can get 20% from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fighters rather than 40% from 2 fighters, he's still eating.
Yeah.
That's logic.
Eating well.
Listen,
Eating well.
he's a very smart man.
Yeah.
Maybe not likable, but smart.
So we all kind of agree that the money's the issue, and it's not so much the promoters don't like each other, it's more about the greed.
I think they don't like each other.
Jealousy.
I think the
Jealousy.
greed builds jealousy,
Yeah.
and which causes resentment because you know we're all close friends, family. But if I keep poking you for the next 10 minutes, you're going to want to punch me. Sooner or later, a little poke, a little prick, now turns into something a bit more. And that's the point is, whereas you keep pushing, and now we're talking about a business. Let's look at Frank and Eddie. You're talking 15 years, 20 years, poking. It will build hate and resentment.
I mean, but both of those have network deals, so they can poke at each other, but they both have platforms to
I think also
promote and market their fighters. You know, PBC now will be forced to do cross promotion whether they like it or not because they've got no network deal now.
Yeah.
You know, I recall a comment about our fighters don't fight on no app. I can't remember who said that.
Yeah.
Now they may not have a choice. You understand?
Yeah.
But my point is, apps are no bad thing. It's about moving with the technology
it's
as it
available.
advances. Do you know what I mean? You know, and it's now. Before we was talking about the zone, it's on an app and blah blah. That's normalised now. You know, now the zone is also on Sky now. Isn't it? They've got their own channel on Sky now.
Amazon, Fire Stick,
So but PBC may be forced to, or they will be forced to.
Yeah, they will do it.
Like I was saying to you when I was watching the Andrade and Benavidez press conference, and Andrade was saying, "Listen, buy the fight."
Yeah.
You know, like just sign up and buy the fight. You know, almost promoting it.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, but. This can't be new news, you know. The PBC must have known that their contract with Showtime is running to a close if certain key performance indicators weren't met. You know, this is, and I believe this is why certain fights were being made in volume, because when you look at the fights PBC had, they've had a good year.
Yeah,
I think it's a turning point, isn't it? It's like, I mean, what I was going to go back to was when you talked about Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. I think we also got to consider who there's a peer, So Frank Warren used to deal with Barry, not necessarily Eddie, So there's got to be a bit of,
I'm dealing with the kid.
Yeah, I'm dealing with a kid. That's what I was going to do. You know, I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's what I was going to say. So when you talk about Frank and I would probably feel the same. You know, if I'm dealing with you, and all of a sudden Tyler starts telling me, I'll be, well, who are you?
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
What's that Tyler's name, man?
No, I would be thinking, who are you? Yeah, because I've been dealing with your dad for all these years. I've gone through fire with your dad, to be honest, and then you upstart trying to tell me.
And conversely, the son will have opinions that he's brought through from his dad about this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, waste man, my dad bad you out, man. What are you talking about?
I agree.
But then going back to your the point with PBC, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No,
it's not a bad thing, because I think when we had PBC with Showtime, and everyone's saying, "Oh, PBC," and where do they go? It weren't helping us. Yeah, and this might, to me, I think we need to all wear t-shirts that say "Save our boxing." Honestly, I think we do, because we need. This is a point now where something needs to happen where we align. And maybe they go under an existing banner. The worst thing in the world would be for it to go with an Amazon or something else. We need it to go with, whether it's the Zone or I don't care.
Under the same
banner, so we can get these fighters closer together.
Can I just say one quick thing? You just mentioned the t-shirts about save our boxing.
Yeah.
We should make those t-shirts and go to a Misfits event. Right. I want to go to something Daniel said a minute ago, and then I want to go back to you, Charlie. Daniel, you mentioned about Andrade saying, buy this fight, buy the pay-per-view, and it brings the thought to my mind: how many promoters are actually promoting? They're putting cards on, but are they angry? Back with again our favourite subject, Mr. Eddie Hearn. Are they angry that he actually promotes? Because, like I said before in the earlier conversation, I'm in this video, that he does more interviews and has a much bigger social media presence, and he name drops every fighter all the time. Who else do you see globally and locally promoting?
I mean, Ben Shalom's been forced to. because, and I remember when Boxer came on the scene, I think Adam Smith at the time says, you know, what you're not going to hear much from the promoter. You're going to hear about the boxers, fighters fighting and things like that. Then sort of Adam Smith wasn't around anymore. Ben Shalom then had to sort of, you know, find his own feet, and you could see the inexperience.
Yeah.
You know, you can see he was a little bit green at the time, and now he is, I don't want to say emulating Eddie Hearn, but obviously he's making his voice heard. You know, he wants to position himself to be sure that, you know, this is who I represent, this is my brand, etc., etc. You know, is he doing a great job doing it? I mean, well,
Yeah.
we saw Lawal and Chamberlain tonight on York Hall. You know, and there's been a few York Hall fights.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's struggling.
It's not the same as the old contracts
No,
I had with
no,
their events
no.
and the promotion.
No, yeah. The same more articulate like you done. Not the same.
I think promoters, I know Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, and it's Sutherland, someone.
Yeah,
Sutherland,
Yeah, they go and talk sport a lot.
Yeah.
They're all on TalkSport, person to that. And they're always promoting their fights. They're all doing it every couple of weeks. So word spreads around, innit? Rager. I don't know about worldwide, but in Britain, they do. I think they're free to do quite well with their promotion.
I think also you got to look at the fighters, because Frank Warren's probably a bit more old school, and he talks about Tyson Fury and says which boxer promotes themselves more than, whether we like him or hate him or loathe him or whatever the words are, he does promote himself. And when we talk about, you know, the greatest ever, you know, someone like Ali, you know, he didn't really need Don King to say much.
No.
He would talk for himself, you know. And so the fighters have a responsibility as well. And some promoters probably, I'm not saying they shouldn't promote, but they probably say you as fighters should do well. So I know Frank Warren's when he had the Fury and White fight, and White didn't turn up for the press conference.
Yeah.
You know, that was a real slap in the face. And I think they had a public workout with this Chamberlain and Lawal, and I don't think it made any difference looking at what we saw.
Yeah.
But you know, they said that Lawal never turned up, so Shalom was upset. So the fighters have a responsibility as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
the reason why I asked that question, you all made good points, but 2023, social media is now like the main source of contact people use or have. It brings you close with everyone, and we still don't have many major stars in boxing. Where before promoters would promote and do things to get their fighters out there. Now, as you mentioned, there's a resilience on the fighter doing their own thing through social media, but then you hire a promoter. It's kind of like it doesn't make sense. If you're a promoter, it doesn't just mean staging. It means putting the effort in yourself or as a company to work in conjunction with that fighter to promote themselves.
But I agree with Charlie. I mean, you still got to put bums on seats, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the fighter has a responsibility to
100%.
get people through the door as well.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not uncommon to hear, I think it might be Eddie Hearn that says, oh, you know, this person, you know, he brings in 600 tickets, 700 tickets. You could, you know, and that also gives a catalyst to say, okay, then, you know what, he can sell tickets. We can then add on the promotion for him as well. And then the fight also has a responsibility to perform.
Yeah.
People want to see a good fight.
Yeah, there's no draws no more, but there's not many draws. Like back in the day, you had Hatton.
Yeah.
You got Hatton would just draw.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a good boxer, but he draw people.
But again,
Tyson back in the day, no one now, but to
the
draw.
draw
Like, yeah.
is that you're having, again, back in the day, let's say with Tyson, Don King with his booming voice.
But you'd have a subset.
Ricky Hatton drew a following locally, which he expanded
Yeah.
for him, trying to say, bit by bit. And that was, yes.
But there's substance. There has to be substance in it.
Yeah, but it's not only the promoter. Like, the boxer needs to bring something to the table. He's got to bring,
100%.
so it's exciting. I want to watch him.
It's
I want
like,
to see him.
it's like, I don't know. I don't want to go into other sports like that. We all watch a bit of football. Someone's watch a bit, you know. And if you've got a team and they're losing every week, but you know the managers say, you know, they're the greatest team, the fans just, well, that ain't true. And it's the same with boxers. You know, it's like they've got to. Alan's absolutely right. They've got to bring something to the table because the promoter can say all they like, but if that fighter doesn't deliver. So if you look, and you talked about followings, we know the boxers have the biggest followings, the Canelos, the AJs, you know, now the Furies, whatever, and a lot of that following because I believe, and again, this is just my take. Fury, there was a lot of jealousy initially with AJ because he couldn't understand why AJ had all this following, and all, you know, it's like, why does everyone
Love him
more than me? Yeah, and then he's had to do TV programs and God knows what to get his. Even if you just look at numbers on Instagram, he's had to do all of that just to get those numbers up. You know, fighting in Ghana, you know, it's like just to get his number. AJ ain't had to do any of that, and he's still matching him on numbers. Yeah, and so the fighter makes a massive difference, no matter who the promoter is.
So let's start wrapping this up. We're not getting the fights. We've kind of identified many issues why we're not getting the fights, and the money issue seems to be this. Who controls the money seems to be the major element of it. We looked at parts of saying short contracts, TV deals, and all these other bits and bobs. What is the one step moving forward to actually get the fights?
People have to collaborate. It's as simple as that. I mean, who's the overseer? Who's the guy, the zone guy? That and I remember.
I know the guy. I can see his name. I know the guy.
He said something about Eddie Hearn's got to work with other promoters. We want to work with other promoters. Do you understand? And Eddie Hearn's got to do that as well, because I think the money element. But I think it was to do with, at one stage they were really going at each other, and it was almost like, you know, calm down. We want to work with other people, you know. But the collaboration has to be there. Give the boxing fans what they want. That's for me. If you're thinking like a fan, then we'll get the fights.
Yeah,
you understand? Like if you think like a promoter, then we won't. But if you think like a fan, you get the fights. You understand? Because the ego goes in the pocket. What? Do you know what I mean? Like.
And the fans are
again, we touched on this at the beginning, and as I said, the last point before we call this today is the ego. Because again, you promote your brand, you like your brand, but I think the ego element of it is a major issue as well, where no one wants to be joint. You have to bring someone down to bring yourself up. I think like morally as a life goal, bringing people down to bring yourself up is like the worst path to any journey. You know what I mean? That you have to step on people deliberately just to hurt them. And I think that ego element, because I said I don't hear positive things coming from the promoters either way.
But I mean, sorry, just one last point, because even things like fights get ordered, goes to purse bids, right? Fights get ordered, goes to purse bids. Promoters are then pulling their fighters out of those purse bids just so that fight doesn't appear on their platform. Even though we want to see it. You understand? And that's happened more than once. And it's like,
but
how can you be
when that promoter's fighting for their lives?
How can you be in the sport, say you love the sport, promote the sport, but at the same time kill the sport?
Exactly.
Because you lose your job. You're going to lose your job.
I mean, but people have targets and numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna lose we see what's going on.
Yeah, people have targets and numbers.
And it's not us being, you know, there's nothing personal here. We just look at it from a business perspective. With what's going on, without naming the brand and who's pulling people out of purse bids, if you get, it's going a bit wrong.
Boxer.
It's going a bit wrong. So if it carries on going in that direction, you could lose your job. It's just as brutal as that. And so you can kind of understand why they're trying to protect certain assets and doing what they're doing. It's not good for us as fans, but you can't understand because they're teetering on the edge.
But then the flip side is this, then, isn't it? If the fighter doesn't fight, we know that, you know, inactivity is kryptonite to a boxer.
Yeah, fully agree.
You understand? So we've seen that.
But imagine your fighter goes and fights on another platform and then loses.
It's happened already. You when Ben Shalom sent Kiwi.
Yeah, it did.
Joe Parker sent him to Joe Joyce, and
since then people have been pulled out of purse bids.
Yeah.
When the
All right then. This promoter issue is not a joke. It's hurting our sport. These promoters need to get along. They need to do something because the sport is suffering because of them. And I don't blame the fighters. Fighters hire promoters and managers to do a job. And from where I'm sitting, they ain't doing their job. You can't want to help the sport, grow the sport and make great fighters but only if you control every page of the book. Makes no sense. If we're going to save boxing, which is what we're talking about, because TV contracts are flying out the window, bums and seats is going down, they need to do something now. If they don't do something now, this great sport with its rich history may be in serious jeopardy in the next 10 to 15 years. Fellas, anything to add?
You know what? We didn't even talk about the sanctioning body should really be doing a bit more as well, isn't it? I don't know why that's come late. Maybe it's late in the day, but the sanctioning body should be, you know, and I guess we did sort of indirectly saying that actually, you know what, we ordered the fight, right?
I think the WBC do a superb job with PBC, and we'll leave it alone. Let's go.
But that's another.
Yeah, another video. We'll see you next time.
Look forward to that.
Yeah. All right then, everyone. Thank you for watching. Please share, like, and subscribe, and